The UN hostages freed by the Bosnian Serbs have arrived in neighbouring Croatia out of Serb hands. But the Bosnian Serbs warn that these hostages will be the last to be set free unless the policy of airstrikes is scrapped. British soldiers in Bosnia begin training for a tougher stand as NATO ministers agree there'll be 10,000 extra troops. Good evening. The 120 UN soldiers held hostage by the Bosnian Serbs and freed last night have been handed over to the United Nations and flown to Croatia. The troops, who include 11 Britons, were flown from Belgrade to the Croatian capital Zagreb, the UN headquarters in the Balkans. A number have tonight travelled on to the base at Split, where they will be debriefed. Serbia had intervened to secure their freedom, but 250 UN troops are still being held captive, and the Bosnian Serbs insist that no more will be released until NATO's policy of punitive airstrikes is abandoned.
It had been a long, tiring journey, and it wasn't finished until 5 o'clock this morning, when the 11 British soldiers, 63 Frenchmen, 41 Canadians, plus several Danes and Swedes, were brought to an hotel in Novi Sad. They'd left 257 other hostages behind them, together, it's thought, with the pilot of the crashed American F-16 plane, which the Bosnian Serbs shot down yesterday. He's said to have survived and to have been taken prisoner. As they relaxed at their hotel in Novi Sad, the freed hostages were still pretty restricted. The Serbian authorities were determined not to take any risks with them, and the waiting journalists weren't allowed to get anywhere near. From time to time, diplomats and other visitors would arrive with supplies for the men. Soft drinks, a few packs of cigarettes. There were glimpses of the French and Canadian troops, but no sign of the 11 men from the Royal Welsh Fusiliers.
I spoke to all our British soldiers.
The British chargé d'affaires from Belgrade, the normally dapper Ivor Roberts, had spent most of the night here and hadn't even had a chance to shave. I asked him if the British soldiers had been worried about their safety while they were in the hands of the Bosnian Serbs.
I don't think they've ever felt in mortal danger, as it were. But obviously, in Bosnia, anything can happen.
And then we caught our first sight of the British soldiers. They were forming up, ready to leave. 6 of them had been injured when their vehicle fell 300 feet down a hill, but in spite of the broken wrists, they were still carrying full packs. They also had their weapons with them, which indicates that they'd never quite been prisoners of war. The officer who had been taken hostage with them had been ordered not to go into detail about their treatment.
Were you quite anxious when you were in there, when you were being held hostage?
Yes, however, I can't expand on that because I haven't been debriefed on the subject.
And how about your troops? How did they hold up against it all?
Oh, very well. We're all in good spirits, and we're all again happy to be out. 5 days of quite anxious times, but it's over now, and I'm very happy. Well, the lads are out, and we're happy to be back.
All right, cheers. I'll be home safe soon. Well, Mum, be all right soon.
But there are still a great many hostages left in Bosnian Serb hands. And in spite of the optimism here, where it's believed the heavy pressure on the Bosnian Serbs is paying off, the crisis isn't over yet. At a news conference in the Bosnian Serbs headquarters in Pale, for instance, there was renewed defiance.
We are not going to release the prisoners if the option of using force against us, to be more specific, of launching airstrikes against us, is not abandoned.
That's clearly a worry. But as the first batch of hostages to be released arrived in Zagreb, the Croatian capital, the hope was that whatever defiant noises the Bosnian Serbs were making, they were really just trying to rid themselves of a serious embarrassment by handing back the peacekeepers they'd kidnapped. Still, there are some optimistic signs. The government here in Belgrade is closer than ever to recognizing the existence of the Bosnian state, something which would undercut the Bosnian Serbs' position very much indeed. It's pressure like this that the outside world hopes will soon bring an end to the hostage crisis. John Simpson, BBC News, Belgrade.
Here, the relatives of the 11 Welsh Fusiliers who've been released say they're relieved, but there won't be any celebrations until all the hostages are freed.
Today's release ended a week of extreme anxiety for Cardiff publican Roger McCabe, whose son Stephen was among the freed Fusiliers, but his thoughts were also with the parents of those still held captive.
We won't celebrate properly till all the hostages are gone, because all the other families, they're still worried about their sons and brothers and whatever. So until everybody's out, then we can properly celebrate.
Celebrations were on hold too for the parents of another released soldier, Lawrence Parry. Despite the experience of the last few days, his mother supports the British Army's mission in Bosnia.
Every career has its advantages and disadvantages, and I'm afraid when you're in the army you have to take some of the difficult ones as well. So yes, I do support him 100%, and I support the action they're doing there.
For the families of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers who have been released, today's news has come as a tremendous relief. For the others, the unpredictability of the Bosnian Serbs means that despite the optimistic signs, the worrying will continue until they too have definite news that the rest of the hostages have been freed. Tim Hirsch, BBC News, Wrexham.
Defence ministers from 15 countries meeting in Paris to discuss the Bosnian crisis have agreed to set up a rapid reaction force. British soldiers would form well over half of the 10,000-strong task force, whose main role would be to protect UN peacekeepers.
After round of high-level meetings, ministers believe their policy-making is finally catching up with events, as they announced the formation of 2 rapid reaction brigades with up to 10,000 troops. It's a transformation of UNPROFOR's military capabilities, although it's intended to protect peacekeepers, not take sides in a war. France's Defence Minister Charles Millon said a tough stance was now the only way to save the peace process. Britain's providing the biggest contribution, and these infantry training and vitesse illustrate the more military approach. They'll be part of the multinational brigade, as are an armoured engineering squadron whose bridge layers will help the UN keep moving through the easily blocked mountain roads. The second new UN unit, the 5,000-strong 24-hour mobile brigades, entirely British. All will be under UN command, and there were warnings not to expect miracles because the mandate hasn't changed.
The UN now has the capability to react much more forcefully and much more successfully if there are threats to its soldiers, to its weapons, or to its vehicles or other forms of equipment. But they're not there to actually become proactive in the sense of taking part in the war.
America's offering only equipment, including attack helicopters, but without aircrew, perhaps in compensation for pulling back from its guarded offer of ground troops. Ministers leaving tonight knew the new forces may be highly capable, but they're also facing some formidable and risky tasks.
The Bosnian Serbs must be reflecting that their hostage-taking may have stopped further airstrikes, but it's also led to the sending of 10,000 well-armed soldiers to Bosnia. The question for the UN is, does it have the will to use this new military muscle? And if so, can it avoid being sucked into a war it wants to avoid? Mark Leahy, BBC News, Paris.
The former Conservative minister, Sir Nicholas Scott, has been bailed to appear at Chelsea Police Station next month after a car accident involving a young child. Sir Nicholas was arrested and breathalyzed on Thursday night after leaving the scene of the accident. He's not been charged with an offence. Figures published by the Halifax Building Society show that house prices are still falling. Prices dropped by 0.9% last month for the 3rd month in a row. Conservative backbenchers are warning ministers that they'll suffer political damage if they don't restore confidence in the housing market by helping those whose houses are now worth less than they paid for them. Britain's first prison wing for ageing prisoners serving life sentences is to be built in Portsmouth. The Prison Service Agency has approved the conversion of a wing of Kingston Jail to rest home accommodation with wheelchair ramps, raised beds and special baths. Life prisoners over the age of 60 will be transferred to Portsmouth from jails throughout the country. The Prince of Wales has said he hopes the Queen may one day visit the Irish Republic. He was speaking at the end of his 4-day official visit, the first by a member of the royal family since Ireland became independent in 1922. The Prince has spent the past couple of days relaxing at a lakeside lodge in County Mayo.
Prince Charles was invited to County Mayo by Lord Brabourne and his wife Countess Mountbatten. They both survived the IRA bomb attack in which her father, Lord Mountbatten, died in 1979. It's their first visit back to Ireland since then. While here, Prince Charles painted a watercolour and spent several hours walking and fishing. He was asked if the Queen would now be able to visit Ireland.
I don't know, but I'm sure at some point it would be marvellous if, if that was possible, of course. Because apart from anything else, the most important thing is to improve and increase the reconciliation between everybody, all sides, which is the most important part of the whole process. Anyway,
this historic visit wouldn't have been possible without the peace process. Many here believe that's been helped by the presence of the Prince of Wales. And there's virtually an expectation, in Ireland at least, that the Queen too will be coming to the Republic, perhaps within a year. Dennis Murray, BBC News, County Mayo.
Now, with the latest on the Rugby World Cup and the England-Japan Football International at Wembley, here's Helen Rollason.
A rugby league club chairman has claimed that 6 members of the England Rugby Union squad at the World Cup have been approached to turn professional. Representatives of at least 4 clubs are in South Africa to sign players for the start of the Super League next year. From Durban, our sports correspondent Rob Bonnet reports.
The man making the claim is the chairman of Sheffield Eagles, Gary Hetherington, who's in South Africa on a shopping trip for prospective rugby league players. He says that at least 6 of England's current squad, including Mike Catt, Neil Back and Victor Obogu, have been approached by officials of top English professional clubs. Wigan, Warrington and Leeds are known to be represented here, all of them backed by new satellite TV money and looking to persuade World Cup stars to switch to rugby league.
A lot of them are ready to make the change, there's no doubt about that. And provided the offer is right and the environment is right, then yes, they are ready to make that change.
We're not surprised that perhaps they are now trying to focus on, 1 or 2 people in the England squad, which is a very successful squad and some very good players in it. I don't think there'll be a mass exodus of these players anyway, and I think that many of them see their future still in rugby union.
What some of these players must ultimately decide is whether the big money but short-term attractions of rugby league outweigh the advantages likely to be forthcoming in rugby union, where the regulations concerning permitted commercial activities are set to be relaxed later this summer. But this is an international shop window, and the giant New Zealand star Jonah Lomu is already the big target for Sheffield Eagles.
It'd certainly be an asset to Sheffield Eagles at Don Valley Stadium, and I would like to think that he could well be wearing our colours next year.
Has he given you any indication that he might want to come to England?
Yes, he has.
And other players likely to command £1 million contracts in rugby league include the South African star James Small. Rob Bonnet, BBC News at the Rugby World Cup in South Africa.
Scotland lost a thrilling match against France in Pretoria tonight. A French try and injury time clinched a 22-19 victory and means that it's Scotland who'll now face the All Blacks in the quarter-finals.
The opportunity to avoid New Zealand in the quarter-finals provided Scotland with sufficient incentive to pursue a 3rd successive World Cup victory, which seemed likely throughout, due mostly once again to their inspirational captain Gavin Hastings. This huge penalty helped Scotland to a 6-3 first-half lead, which Hastings then played a decisive role in increasing. BBC News at the Rugby World Cup in South Africa.
And the Ivory Coast winger Max Brito has been left paralysed in both legs and an arm after suffering a serious spinal injury during his side's defeat against Tonga in Rustenburg. Doctors don't yet know whether he'll regain the use of his limbs. Meanwhile, Australia and South Africa completed their group matches. South Africa beat Canada 20-0 and Australia had a comfortable win over Romania. They won by 42 points to 3, scoring 6 tries. Winger Joe Roff got 2 of them, the best coming just before half-time. Today's results mean that Australia will play the winners of tomorrow's match between England and Western Samoa. The England footballer Paul Gascoigne has confirmed that he intends to sign for the Scottish champions Rangers. Gascoigne made his return to international football after an absence of 15 months in England's Umbro Cup match against Japan at Wembley today. Afterwards, he flew to Glasgow where he told waiting fans, "Rangers are the only club for me, but any deal is unlikely to be sealed until next month." England turned in one of their worst performances under Terry Venables as they played Japan, a team they were expected to beat comfortably. But they needed a penalty 2 minutes from time, awarded after Hashir Otani handled on the line. David Platt scored with an ease that hardly typified England's performance to claim a hollow 2-1 victory. And the Republic of Ireland were held to a humiliating 0-0 draw in their European Championship qualifying match against Liechtenstein, a team of amateurs who conceded 15 goals in their last 2 matches. 14-year-old Martina Hingis has been knocked out of the French Open Tennis Championships, but another teenager, Chandra Rubin, has beaten the 5th seed Jana Novotná. Rubin, ranked 53rd in the world, staged an astonishing comeback. From being 5-love down in the final set, she exploited a nervous Novotná, saving 9 match points on her way to winning 6-7, 6-4, 8-6. And the IBF heavyweight boxing champion George Foreman has been ordered to give Axel Schulz a rematch. It follows his controversial points win over the German in April. The 46-year-old has been told to fight or give up his title. Peter.
And the main news again, the UN hostages freed by the Bosnian Serbs have now arrived in Croatia. But the Bosnian Serbs say any further releases will be conditional on a guarantee of no more airstrikes. That's all from the BBC Newsroom tonight. From Helen and from me, good night.